I want to provide a warm welcome to our guest speaker today, Dr. Adan Escobedo Sanchez. And Dr. Adan is a scholar dedicated to the social justice of undocumented students. This is a lived reality that he has experienced throughout his trajectory in education, and he will share more about that. But also important in his trajectory is his social justice dedication and dissertation that he embarked on as a doctoral student, and now which is published and available for everybody to read, but also that we're going to have the great privilege and honor to learn about. And his dissertation and the talk for today is titled Resistencia Indocumentada, exploring the lived experiences of higher education undocumented students in the San Diego-Tijuana border region. So with no further ado, I pass on the mic to Dr. Escobedo.
Thank you, Dr. Orta, for welcoming me. Sorry, I'm also getting a little bit of under the weather. So before I get started, I actually have something weighing on my soul, something that just occurred today. And I'm not gonna give too much details, but it's something that's gonna will contextualize what I'm gonna talk today, which is the notion of borders and the fear of us being considered others. So without too much detail, I was in a meeting today about an upcoming project that I'm doing next March, which will include a trip to Tijuana. And an individual was sharing a lot of concern about their fear of going to Tijuana for this project, and they were trying to figure out a way to get out of it. I, as a facilitator, stated that there is no reason. I mean, they don't have to partake if they don't want to, but I was curious, why was it so fearful to go to the border? And they were like, well, it's inherently risky to leave the country and go somewhere across the border. Like, yes, I told her I had issues when I went to Canada. I've had students who've gone to Spain or anything. There's always an inherent risk. But what is it specifically about going to Tijuana? Obviously, I knew what they were thinking. I think we all at this point, as individuals living in the border, have the assumption that because of the media it protects and the way this country of the United States has portrayed the neighbor countries as dangerous, there's this fear that going there, something's bad's gonna happen. But I really wanted to tap into what is that fear of not wanting to explore something new. Your worldview really expands when you go to new countries, when you go to new places you've never been before. Recently I've fallen in love with the state of New Mexico. I love California, but I've got to explore New Mexico, Arizona. I've been to Philadelphia, things that I've never been able to do because as an undocumented person. I always stuck in the state of California. I never even went to Tijuana until 2016 because of my undocumented status. And even though I did have that inherent fear, I still decided to make the choice. Now, I didn't force this person to say, hey, they have to commit to this project and they have to go to the event in Tijuana. But it really dawned on me of how serious that fear is of the other, because they were saying, well, I don't feel safe. I don't understand why this institution thinks it's okay to make others safe. My parents don't support me in this project because they don't think I'm safe. And if they don't think I'm safe, all these statements without actually laying out that fear, like explain to me what it is, which is usually rooted in xenophobia. It's the reality. We have xenophobia. They're rooted in it all. And just because of it, someone is willing to miss out on a really good opportunity because of xenophobia, because of what's going on. And I think that's the root of my issues growing up here. As I stated before and anticipated, I grew up as an undocumented person in the United States, something I wasn't aware of until I got to middle school. And so with privileges given to me by Dr. Falcon Orta, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So this is based on the defense that I gave earlier this year, called Resistencia Indocumentada, exploring the lived experiences of higher education undocumented students in the San Diego-Tijuana border region. I will be paraphrasing a lot of it because at this point I've said it enough times, and also because I should know my own defense. If you ever decide to be a doctor, you should probably know your own defense at the back of your head. So my positionality, I am a Mexican immigrant. I was born in Tijuana in El Tecolote. I came here at the age of 2. I wasn't aware of my undocumented status. I was by any chance what you would call an all-American kid. Played baseball as a little kid. Had dreams of being president. I ran for student body in 4th grade. But I spoke English more than I did at home than my parents did, which did create a little of a schism. My grandmother, she would always say, "En esta casa se habla español." I was raised on TV. Power Rangers, The Simpsons. It was the 90s. But I was still low income. I came from a family of panaderos. I know the trade. I still do. My family, we were able to survive in the early 90s because of the booming trade. But around middle school, I was moved to another, instead of my feeder school, which is, the school next to my elementary school, I went to a school in another city. And the reason was due to some incident where I accidentally did the first cybercrime in my hometown. But for me, this led an argument with my mother, which I asked her, why do I need to move to schools? Like, what's this school? Why is this school better than the one I'm currently in? And through a lot of arguments, I asked my mom, like, so do I even have a choice? And she says, no, you don't, because you are undocumented. Now, I always felt like I kind of knew that I was undocumented, but it was never until it was laid out that I realized, hey, this is real. And it is unfortunate because I still didn't know what that meant. What is undocumented? When you are, turning 13, what does that mean? You don't really understand the severity of that. I was placed in AVID, which is Advancement via Individual Determination. It's a course to get students who are considered at risk to find a pathway to college. And in 8th grade, I applied for a scholarship with all my classmates. It was an assignment, and I won. I was very excited that I had scholarship money. And then my teacher asked me a question that I still think about all the time, which is, so can you bring in your social security number so that we can get you, your money in a bank or something? And I didn't know what to say because I didn't know what that meant. Until I realized that as an undocumented person, I didn't have a social security number. I mean, it's just reality. I had a classmate laugh when I had to tell the teacher, I don't know what it is. And they're like, he doesn't have a social security number. I brushed it off kind of like, I don't know it because my parents won't tell me or they lost it or something. But in reality, I knew that this is now some sort of reality for me. I won't be able to access some educational funds that I am entitled to. I won that scholarship fair and square, and yet I wasn't able to attain it because of missing 9 numbers. And so I think about this now because I live 7 minutes away from the Tijuana border. If I step outside my house, I can see the gorgeous hills of all the houses that light up at night in Tijuana. I can see the flag. I can, if traffic backs up where I exit my house, it's because it's Friday night and people are all going home. So I'm 7 minutes away. Think about that. 7 minutes away of distance made a huge impact in my life. If I was born 7 minutes closer up north to where I live now, my life would have a different trajectory. And I hate using the thing that this is the cards I was dealt, because we're not this is not a game of poker. This is just reality. But I think, why are those 7 minutes so valuable? What is the point of lines if not to divide? Thinking about that little incident I told you earlier about today of someone, being scared to go to Tijuana, it's all about lines. This country created a division, a line that's imaginary. We don't have a physical border. It's just a border that was created by men. And because of that, we have this now layer of xenophobia. For you in Mexicali, Calexico, you guys are much closer to that border. I saw it this year when I helped out with the building bridges graduation. But I also saw a border being torn down because of you guys. And it's something that gives me hope that even though there's a barrier separating you all and a distance of time of waiting, that hard work that's being done by Dr. Falcon Horta and everybody at the Cross-Cultural Center and at these guest lectures, these walls are being divided. But I'm talking about a time during post 9/11 in the Bush era where it didn't really matter what I thought. I felt alone. So I was the first one in my family to graduate high school, immediate family. And I went to college. Currently, I'm an educator, and I try to take all the lessons that I've learned to support students who are undocumented transfronterizos, English learners, although everybody's an English learner, but I'll say like emergent English learners and anyone who needs help. Because there was a time where I was excited and I applied to college and I got I got to community college to apply for my first courses. I tested well. I was supposed to be in advanced classes and I registered. And I saw this the enrollment cost. It was $900. Now nowadays, if I saw a $900 bill on an enrollment page, I'd be very happy. But at the time, it was 2005. I had no job, or 2006. I had no job. I was barely 18, and $900 seemed like a lot, especially for community college. And so I told my mom, like, I'm not gonna go to college. Like, why should I? So I returned to Southwestern College, ready to withdraw, and I don't know if it was like divine intervention or just people being, good people. The administrator, the registrar, was kind enough to like read body language, and she said, without even me saying anything, she said, by any chance, if you know someone who is undocumented or who doesn't have a social security number, let them know that they can apply for these specific grants called the AB 540, which gives you status as a California resident, even if you're undocumented. And realizing that, taking 9 units goes from $900 to just $150, is a huge deal. Plus, we had the Board of Governors fee waivers, and I got a job at Domino's. I was able to go to college, but what really still stands out to me is the fact that someone was able to deduce this out of me, and without spilling it out, without having to say, hey, are you undocumented? They were just willing to give out information. This right there is the essence of what we call a true, border serving individual. Someone who's willing to be engaging without asking questions, but still opening doors. And so for me, that was one of the more significant moments that I was able to go to college. The next issue, though, was going to college and affording it. Now, going to community college is great, getting associates great, but I had bigger plans. And so I engaged in cross enrollment, which let me pay for community college prices and still take upper division courses at various institutions. The issue is that you still have to matriculate to graduate. And so when I decided to enroll at UCSD, because that's where I took the most credits, I got accepted initially. And as I was getting ready to, choose like my courses, I was given a bill, $10,000. If 900 was bad already a few years ago, just imagine 10,000. And again, I didn't qualify for any of this. I couldn't prove my identity. So I remember being on a bus, heading home because I didn't drive, and crying, openly crying. You know how embarrassing it is to openly cry in a bus? Thinking, what's the point of education if it's not gonna get me anywhere? If it's not gonna open any doors? I might as well just continue the family trade, which is being a panadero, or continue working at Domino's Pizza. But I decided to keep going, so I took another year off, still taking classes at Southwestern College here in Chula Vista, and then I reapplied again with the hope that somehow things will get better the next year. So I did apply, and I got accepted again at UCSD, but then I also got accepted at UC Riverside. And Riverside, again, without any reason or any need to explain, they just offered me a grant. No need to prove anything, just here's a grant. Do you want it? Yes. You get to go to our school? Yes. And so I accepted. And again, this is, an open policy of just supporting students. Doesn't matter if I'm undocumented, if I'm a transfronterizo, It just matters that there should be support without any questions, genuine support for your students. And so for me, being able to graduate cemented a lot of things for me. It opened the door to prove to a lawyer that I'm a valued individual that should get their permanent residency. I was able to look at jobs and after-school programs with my skills and become a teacher, entering credentialing programs, eventually getting a graduate degree and a master's in education in STEM, and then finally a doctorate. But if anything matters more than just my education is the world experience of individuals that I have met. I think if it wasn't for that person at Southwestern College, I wouldn't be here today. If it wasn't for the grants openly given at UC Riverside, I wouldn't be given today. And if it hasn't been stated before by Dr. Falcon Horta, I actually took classes with her in 2006 at Southwestern College. We started together. We knew each other. She didn't know that I was undocumented. I didn't know that she was a Transfronterizza. But what we did have is each other, supporting each other in our classes, hanging out, creating a mutual connection in this institution so that I wasn't alone in school. I had someone who was a friend. Trajectories brought us back together, Dr. Falcon and Horta and I. And so it's an honor to be here. So that's my positionality. I am an educator. I'm a first to graduate, low income, formerly undocumented, and I'm a Mexican immigrant. So let's talk about the problem of the master narrative, which is the idea that there's only two sides of being undocumented. We have the criminal and the exceptional. And while you always hear like just today, the idea that, oh, they're coming from Mexico, Trump famously said in 2015, Mexico isn't sending their best. They're criminals. There are other things I don't want to say because even if he said it, I don't feel the need to warrant to repeat. But he said a lot of things that we clearly aren't. But there's another sense. There's the exceptional. I also, growing up, I used to hear stories of undocumented individuals that were, for the most part, shown to be like super people. An undocumented person got accepted to 7 Ivy Leagues. An undocumented person at age 15 solved this. An undocumented person did that. And that's great. That shows that there's individuals who are great. But when we consider how they promote the idea of how dreamers need to become U.S. citizens because of these specific individuals, it pushes the idea of exceptionality is merit-based. The dreamers should become U.S. citizens because they're so amazing, because they're able to do what others can't. And that pushes the idea that only those who are exceptional should be here. Everybody else, sorry, you're not good enough. And that just calms, neoliberal fears of complacency. So I don't find myself exceptional. At least I didn't at the time, and I still don't. I just thought of myself as an individual who grew up here. I only graduated with a 3.2 GPA in high school. Weighted, by the way, weighted. So it was worse when it wasn't unweighted. How was I going to compete with that notion? So that's the issue of the master narrative, that there's only two kinds of undocumented people. Now, even if you get to go to college, we have these concerns. For example, 56% of college students receive incorrect information. These are from individuals that are supposed to be trained and support our undocumented students so they can go through all the correct channels. And I tell you, I've experienced this. It happens. Even when I became a U.S. citizen, I lost financial aid status because of just the change. My social security number stayed the same. I'm the same individual, just I became from a permanent resident to a U.S. citizen, and yet somehow that screwed up everything. Undocumented students report a high levels of stress. They, and they don't always access mental health services. One thing that I wish I would have talked about more is also the stigma of needing mental health. Think about your family. How do they address mental health? But me, in a traditionally Hispanic household, my mom, for a while, she didn't really believe in mental health or taking some time off or needing to de-stress. She didn't realize that depression is a real thing. And so it's one of those things that, as in the community, we also need to let go. And actually seek it out, but it's even worse when you don't have access to it in college. Undocumented students face a high financial insecurity. Sometimes I would have to figure out if I had to pay for my dorm, or if I had to pay for my classes or get a job. I got offered a lot of work as a student employee at UC Riverside and libraries and the bookstores, but I had to always turn them down because the money wasn't enough, and that was supposed to go to my apartment. I needed to figure out how to eat, so I waited until they opened a job in the kitchen so that I could eat. Because if you work in the kitchen, at least you get a free meal. And I would go in there before work, eat, and then sign in, work, and then eat my official, and then check out and take whatever was left over. So, undocumented students face a lot of these kind of decisions where they need to figure out what's most important because of where your money has to go. And then, of course, family. You have to support family. You're one of the ones that got into college, but you still have your family waiting at home. If something is needed and something happens, you're usually expected to stop everything and go back home and support them. And then, of course, a lot of students deal with immigrated distraction that can hurt their academic performance. Consider the idea that at any point, especially in schools near the border, ICE or customs can come in, and even though they may not be after you, they can create this level of anxiety. And so for me, that could also be a distraction. So I asked myself, with all of this going on, with the two narratives that we have, and with the idea that, we have a lot of things preventing students from graduating college, undocumented students from graduating college, what are the factors that lead to resilience and resistance, and how does that manifest? And then are there any, and the impact, what are the impacts of external societal support? So, I did a lot of research within the literature, and I found 4 recurring themes, which is one is that there is this thing of illegality as a master status. Master status is that one identity that you see above all. Now, there is current research that's trying to get rid of that idea that we're actually all multi status, that we can have multiple identities. But I will say, at least growing up, I didn't identify as a Mexican first. I didn't identify as a Spanish speaker, as a heterosexual male. The first thing I did every morning when I woke up is I thought of my undocumented status. And I don't mean it literally, like I woke up, oh my God, I'm undocumented, but more like a lot of the things that impacted my decisions were based on my idea that, I am illegal. And that was a term that was used at the time. Illegality is a master status. Then there's the notion of academic threat. What are the practices done in schools that really push you to not want to graduate, or let's say not want to graduate, because we all want to graduate, but not continue? What is stopping you from being the most successful you can be? I also noticed, however, the idea of academic support. What is keeping students going? What's supporting them? And then the notion of belonging. Like, the idea is like, what does it mean to be grounded in a higher education institution? So these 4 topics were reoccurring in a lot of literature. And then within that literature, I came to the realization of my theoretical framework, which is undocumented critical theory. And undocumented critical theory is based on critical race theory, as well as critical pedagogy as a dialogue for praxis. And this is all usually based on like Marxism. But critical race theory then led to Latino critical theory, and of course then resistance theory. And so when combined together, we have undocumented critical theory, which is that it's an immigrant binary rhetoric, as well as it embarks on a journey towards social justice and justice and empowerment in the communities. And the tenets of undocumented critical theory deal with fears and endemic. Everybody has a different experience. It's not the same. The notion of sacrificios, and then the need of acompañamiento. Okay. And then if I'm going to say it's like liminal experience, just means everybody's different. Sacrificios means sacrifices, and acompañamiento means mentorship. So, let's talk about my methodology. So what I really decided to use is, I had this whole idea of using testimonials, of using PAR and everything, but I landed on narrative inquiry. And the idea, and the reason why I landed on narrative inquiry is because I wanted to really take stories at face value. Okay. Now, narrative inquiry in researching individuals, especially once when it comes to like stories of from the border, there's also a notion called like pláticas, but I didn't go that deep. It's the idea that the story someone tells you is the truth, whether it's actually accurate or not. In high school, I read a book called The Things They Carried. And in The Things They Carried, it tells the stories about the Vietnam War. And yet the author tells us not everything that's being told happened, yet it is the truth. The notion that there is truth to what is being shared with you. Maybe the story that I just shared with you about my life might have not been extremely awkward because accurate because of all the years that have passed, my memory and everything. But in still there's an inherent truth that guided me here, and that's why I'm speaking with you all today. Narrative inquiry has the ability to be political and transformative in nature, and everything is treated as a valid data point. And of course, it's meant to give individuals who are usually underrepresented a voice. And of course, it's meant to disrupt public perception. And the last one is really important because I'm trying to disrupt the idea of the two, individuals, which is criminal or exceptional. So I went and explored five local institutions in the San Diego Tijuana border lands, and I interviewed students in here. And I don't really need to get into this graphic. This was more just I had to change the name, so they're you won't be able to know which schools these are, although there is a hint. I just won't say what it is. But it's just good to know the context of the school. Like some is like one of them is like the oldest institution. It considers itself a Hispanic serving institution. One is a community college with a high percentage of Latina, Latino, Latinx individuals. One is a private college that's a faith-based. One is one of the best one of the institutions with a higher STEM program. And so when looking at these institutions, I kind of realized that they're all working towards becoming Hispanic serving institutions. Now, luckily, I've seen firsthand that San Diego State Imperial Valley is a Hispanic serving institution, and it does a great job, and I'm very happy to see that. But I decided that my work needed to go further. It's not just enough to be a Hispanic supporting institution. We need to be now an undocumented serving institution, which is based on Garcia's framework. So the idea is to go from undocumented enrolling, which is just enrolling on. It's not just enrolling undocumented students, but not giving any tools of support. Undocumented producing means that we are creating an institution that supports undocumented students, but still doesn't give him all the tools to graduate. Undocumented enhancing, which creates cultural awareness and full support of the students, still not fully engaged in whether they graduate or not. And of course, undocumented serving, which means that we make an institution that is fully supportive of enrolling and meets a quota, an institution that serves the students and provides them but all the means to be successful, creates a space that's that taps into their cultural wealth and generates belonging, and then finally make sure they graduate. So that's where we want to go. And this is still a novel framework. So, hopefully one day this is going to be something that might be implemented or will be implemented at San Diego State Imperial Valley, where we'll see, undocumented students graduate at a high rate. So I have these participants all given names that are random. And I always think about like their identity. So a lot of them identify themselves as Mexican or Latina, Latinx. And they just talk about who they are in this slide, but just to get to know them. But here's where I want to talk about those 4 frameworks that I saw in the literature and how I saw them in the interviews. So for example, when we talk about illegality as a master status, I had students who say like, I was worried about money. I'm still having to pay for my university fees, and I'm sure if I can afford it all the way through. Sometimes there are people on campus who ask for signatures for bills or petitions, or simply ask if you're registered to vote, and they don't take no for an answer. And it can get a little bit comfortable. Think about that. How many of you guys have been like, I won't say the word accosted, but you're trying to get someone signed, and it's usually a good effort, but they also aren't trying to say, hey, you know what? Maybe this person's undocumented, and they're really aggressive. And then what do you say to that? I had a student who asked them, my professor asked me if I was called an illegal. Like, imagine being called an illegal, that your identity isn't legal in the United States. And then one of the quotes that stands out the most is, in the beginning of my freshman year, the College and Career Center brought in the Border Patrol. for the career fair, and I was told by other undocumented students that they had seen the Border Patrol on campus and to be careful. I was really afraid to walk on campus because I didn't know exactly where or why they were on campus. And I later learned they were on campus for a career fair. At the time, I didn't see any other reason for being on campus, and so it caused a lot of anxiety as to whether it had come to do with anything with me, if I had done something wrong in my application for them to come and to the school that I attend. So think about this. The school did nothing inherently wrong. They had a career fair and they invited the Border Patrol. Yet, their own presence was a threat to undocumented students. And this student was able to make a connection saying, maybe I messed up in my application, and now it puts me as a open target for Border Patrol. And a lot of the things that students has also said is that even by enrolling in college, they're putting their family at risk because, usually you have to put in the application who your parents are. And if you're undocumented, most likely your parents are undocumented. And so just consider just how much, I don't want to say a leap, but just how much of that connection that student made because of that threat going on. So then when interviewing these students though, I did find academic support and belonging. Students are asking, I want scholarships, I need support groups, I like food pantries, and I get paid fellow opportunities. Some students say, I think that if the university fully recognized the growth in the amount of undocumented students on campus and be recognized as an ever-changing needs of the students due to abrupt changes, because it's abrupt. Sometimes we get a president who's anti-immigration, then we get a president who says they're pro-immigration but doesn't do anything. But the perception constantly changes, and it would be great to make sure that no matter what, this positive perception of undocumented students is positive. We have students who are saying it would be great if they would allow undocumented students who don't have a DACA to work at CSUs and UCs and probably just also outside institutions. But being able to work in these institutions and being supervised by them will be a win-win by both sides. I mean, if we really want our institutions to be considered undocu-supporting and undocu-serving, and it'd be great if we can figure out ways to hire and pay for undocumented students to be there. And then someone said it would be great to see graduation rates in our community. While seeing as graduation rates in our community are lower in comparison to other groups, some would simply say that finishing and graduating is a huge accomplishment, which it definitely is. But I also believe that seeking and breaking down barriers in fields we are not seen frequently and demonstrating that we do belong is greater. And that's truth. For many years, I was calling myself Adan. It was a name the teacher gave me in community college. I liked it because it was easier to say. People couldn't say Adan correctly. They would say, oh, it's Adan or Adan or Adan. So someone just said Adan. I said, you know what? That's going to be it. And so I anglicized my name. And for many years, that's what I went under. I am Adan until I finally got to my PhD program. And someone said, no, if you want to go by Adan, you can. But consider this. Why are you going as Adan? Why not Adan? Don't you think that Adan deserves a seat at the table? You already made it at this program. You should have been at the seat earlier, and it's a shame you weren't. But now that you're here, take ownership. And so I am. I'm taking full name, not just Adan Escobedo, but Adan Escobedo Sanchez. And so, it's important to realize that we deserve a spot. Whether we're missing these 9 numbers or not, it's important to be recognized here. What I found within the study is that a lot of what I read in the literature really does align with what the students saying. They do need further support. They're still experiencing liminality and academic threats, even to this day, even though, we've made a lot of changes within the last 10 years since Obama became president and they started, DACA. Teachers need to be trained, formally trained to be undocumented supporting. And then, of course, family and community fosters resistance and resilience, and that pushes for self-perception, which contributes as students to see themselves as points of reference to community. And it's true. A lot of undocumented students said, hey, you know what? I'm undocumented, yet I'm in college. I need to be that point of reference to the next generation, or my family can see, hey, you know what? They're undocumented, but they graduated. This also allowed me to make findings within recent gaps. People are tired of being political points. Undocumented students told me, I appreciate the study and everything, but I'm also tired of being a political point. Can I just be me? Can I just go to school and graduate? And that's true. Why do we need to be a pawn of just saying, okay, we're going to give them citizenship? We're not going to give them citizenship. Some court in Texas says no. Some court in California says yes. One thing that was surprising is that Trump, didn't really make a political impact. This perception, this xenophobia, this racism was always here. And I agree. When I was in high school in 2006, Bush said, build a wall. And when I heard it 10 years later, it was no different. People are still asking to build a wall, as if there isn't a wall over there. And one thing that is new that I realized was that COVID-19 did have a huge impact in undocumented college students, because they didn't have the access and support and sense of belonging that they normally would have had in an in-person campus when they were in quarantine. So a lot of services weren't offered to them, and they missed out on something that was quintessential in supporting to their experience. So for me, the idea is the unexpected findings too. Surprisingly, the idea that someone can be a point of reference is great, because I never thought I would be a point of reference. I hid in the shadows. If I had a support group when I was at Southwestern College, things would have been different. And I did have a friend group. Like I said, I did know Dr. Falcon Horta there, but at the same time, I didn't really have a point of reference for someone to say, hey, you can do this. It was just stories of exceptionalism. And then we have the notion of institutional engagement. We really need schools to stand up and say, we have undocumented students and we're going to support them. And it could be hard at some institutions, but particularly near the border. But if an institution near the border can make a stand, then other institutions across the entire country can too. And then, of course, the notion of documenting the undocumented and transformation, meaning that by taking these stories, by taking these quotes from these individuals, I collected a lot of stories that I realized I had the same experience. I was never alone. I just didn't realize it at the time. And if we can, document undocumented persons, then we're at least realizing that these stories are rich and individual and shows the beauty of community, which is something that's usually shared across the world except the United States, but also the power of individualism, that undocumented students are still individuals that travel on this journey by themselves. For me, this led me then to realize that the recommendations is policymakers need to acknowledge that undocumented students are everywhere and that we need to support them. They are part of our economy. They're part of our infrastructure in the United States, and we need to at least encourage them to stay here and support them any way we can. We need to support high school counselors. We need them to actually be undocu-trained so that future college students aren't scared of applying to college and fearful of getting their family implicated in something. We need to have administrators in high school and in colleges be trained in how to deal with undocumented students. And finally, I need to encourage researchers of undocumented students to fully be aware and be a stakeholder. It's not a point of reference. It's not a point of political point. It's a notion of, hey, we're here to support and learn from a group because it's inherently valuable. So for me, I tried to dispel the notion of the master narrative, the idea that undocumented students are either criminals or exceptional. I realized that they're neither. We're just people. But by just continuing to grow, even if you're not getting into 5 Ivy Leagues, even if you're not, making, like finding the cure for cancer or something, you're just someone who gets to go to college and, persist, you're exceptional. And I think that's what makes us great. And so I always end with like the idea of the greatest immigrant of all time, someone who is undocumented, but we don't think about it. Superman. Superman literally is an undocumented person. They grew up in the United States. They came from somewhere else where people really found out they'd be xenophobic about. And yet this is the idea of exceptionalism. The idea that we don't need to be Superman. We're just good. We're just, good people trying to make our lives. And if that's all we are, then that's exceptional as it is. So thank you.
Thank you so much for this amazing guest lecture, very important in so many levels. From the, of course, the important findings, the recommendations and implications for practice, but also the representation. Representation matters, and for our students, whether it's our students here in this class or beyond and outside this class, where this recording is going to be shared, the representation and visibility of undocumented people, and people like yourself, and seeing themselves in in whether it's speaker series or educators or just everyday people, like you mentioned, is important. I do think that unfortunately at SUSU Imperial Valley, the population and experience, the undocumented experience, is an invisible experience that we need to create visibility in a way where it's humanizing, and where it's talking about a safe space and inclusive space with events like this one, with guest lectures, with conversations like this, where it's welcoming for everybody, whether you are or are not undocumented, but definitely the representation is very important. So I think that's another just highlight and the importance of today's guest lecture and your conversation and your findings, but also story that you shared.